What's up, JEFusion fans? This is Philip, and welcome back to another video. So, Pseudo Riders. So, in the Kamen Rider franchise, these are characters that are technically not Kamen Riders, but they kind of have some similar aspects. Maybe even designs might look misleading. Again, some design aspects, some characteristics that Kamen Riders may also have, but again, these characters are not considered Kamen Riders. Again, unless the name includes Kamen Rider, then these characters that I'm going to mention are, going to be in that pseudo rider category. So if I miss anyone that you might consider as a pseudo Kamen Rider, so tell me in the comments and why tell me why you think they are pseudo Kamen Riders as well. So, anyways, let's start this video. Now, I believe that the idea of the pseudo Kamen Rider actually existed from the very beginning with the original Kamen Rider. So we have had the infamous Shocker Riders. Now I know that Kamen Rider has been iterated, at least twice with like Kamen Rider the first, the next, and then the more recent Kamen Rider remake by director Hideaki Anno. So they also featured the Pseudo Riders. So, or the Shocker Riders, to correct myself. So the Shocker Riders, of course, are Shocker's answer to Kamen Riders Ichigo and Nigo. So considering like how apparently they thought that the creation of these two, right? So Ichigo and Nigo, like they thought it was successful. They wanted to recreate it, but this time they made sure that the Shocker Riders were properly brainwashed so that they don't turn on Shocker like Ichigo and Nigo did. However, they still all end up being defeated by the pair of Kamen Riders. So, with that said, they do get the ball rolling for other, Kamen Riders in history, or rather, pseudo riders. And by the way, I'm not going to limit myself to like either heroes or villains. Like they could go either way, but nonetheless, in a more general sense, like these characters again, like share like characteristics with the actual writers, while technically not being called Kamen Riders themselves. So again, like I've mentioned, the Shocker Riders, so they are not Kamen Riders, but again, they do share you know similar aspects like the belt transformation, the suit design, and whatnot, and are generally supposedly designed to be as powerful as Ichigo and Nigo. But again, like I mentioned, they're always defeated, no matter the iteration. Now, the next pseudo writer that I'm going to mention is actually one of the more debated um, characters in the franchise's history, and that would be Electro Human Tackle, or Denpaningen Tackle from Kamen Rider Stronger. Many people would like to consider her as the first female writer in history, but again, she was never called a Kamen Rider, but you know, she transforms. Sure, she was also kind of like an enhanced human, you could say, and I think she was really handy in combat. She would often hold her own while offering support, to Kamen Rider Stronger. But yeah, Tackle was definitely in that gray zone where she does have rider-like qualities, but nobody was actually calling her Kamen Rider, not even Toei. I think Toei refused to recognize um, Tackle's contribution, or rather, they know her contributions, but they really just didn't want to call her Kamen Rider. But nonetheless, she would also set kind of like an inspiration for actual female Kamen Riders going forward. So yeah, now we actually jump to another, again, another Kamen Rider like character, but for the most part, he wasn't really considered a Kamen Rider. That would be Shadow Moon from the original Kamen Rider Black. So, like we know the origins of Kamen Rider Black and Shadow Moon, especially if you've watched, the entire series. But for those who don't, so Kotaro Minami and Nobuhiko Akizuki basically were born on the same day on an eclipse, I guess. Like they were candidates for the next century king, chosen by Gorgon, and they were both transformed into cyborgs, imbued with the powers of the Kingstone. So of course Kotaro escapes. He avoids getting brainwashed, and he you know decides to fight Gorgon as Kamen Rider Black, while Nobuhiko, who failed to escape, or Kotaro failed to rescue him, so he was the one who was brainwashed by Gorgon, and therefore he was turned into Shadow Moon. So again, Shadow Moon, like he obviously shares design similarities with Kamen Rider Black. Again, like those bug eyes, that antenna. So he also has his own like rider kick, but he wouldn't actually be called Kamen Rider until uh, Kamen Rider Black Sun. But I would consider that iteration as a completely different entity in and of itself. It was a completely different story, even though, yes, the main protagonist was still Kotaro Minami. He was still Kamen Rider Black, but it is like a very parallel timeline. So, in that universe, at least, so Nobuhiko Akizuki did become Kamen Rider Shadow Moon, but again, in the original 1988 version, even when he returned for Kamen Rider Black RX, Shadow Moon was just Shadow Moon. He was not a Kamen Rider, and even in his like future appearances, or yeah, like that, within Kamen Rider Decade, and maybe in the superhero Tyson franchise or series, so he wasn't really, again, in that kind of rider area, but he did like just like Tackle, uh Shadow Moon would also become the blueprint for villainous riders in the future. Now we hop into the 2000s. Kamen Rider Ryuki. So Kamen Rider Ryuki featured the alternatives. So these are uh, not necessarily Kamen Riders. Again, like they weren't really called Kamen Riders anyway, even though their designs were actually based on like the original Kamen Riders, despite like their uh, main contract beast uh, being crickets. So Psycho Rogue, but nonetheless, despite like wearing belts, and they do have like the similar card system as the other riders in Ryuki, the actual riders who fought in this battle royale. So again, these were like man-made. Even their contract beasts were, I believe, artificial. Nonetheless, well, they kind of proved to be okay, I guess. But in the end, none of these alternatives got a win against the Kamen Riders. But nonetheless, it was an interesting, situation. Like, technically, they're not supposed to be in that, uh, you know, rider war, but nonetheless, they did make the technology. So it was a really interesting take. So we are immediately followed the next year with Kamen Rider Fives when the uh, Ryo Troopers came into the scene. So later on in the show, so Smart Brain basically tried to mass produce the rider system, and one of the major characters in the show, so Naoya Kaido, so he was basically like the leader of the Ryo Troopers, but after seeing, I guess, what happens after encountering like the Orphanok King, if I remember correctly, like he just went like, nope, I'm out. like, but yeah, like the Ryo Troopers would be like, I guess like the poster child for like mass-produced Kamen Riders. Although they're definitely the first, um, but they're definitely not the least either. Well, I don't know what I'm saying, but anyways, so they would be like the blueprint for like mass producing like writers, I guess. But again, these are not really considered common writers at all. But they, again, like the mass production type thing, kind of like, it's like the gym to the Gundam, you know, that kind of situation. Now, speaking of like another mass-produced type, we we immediately jump to Kamen Rider Exade with the you know, I guess ride players. Yeah, there we go. So one of, again, like another, I guess, major character. So like Nico basically. So she apparently, like, she got her own like customized version with the ride player Nico, which just I don't know, like kept her cap, her backpack, and despite all of the ride players having like the same like stats, apparently, like the same strength parameters for like punching, kicking, ride player Nico's custom suit apparently was more powerful than the rest of like the more typical ride players. So it was an interesting note. So again, like we have mass production pseudo riders, and then one that would become a bit more special than the others, given that, I guess, the explanation was, given that Nico was like a more experienced gamer, like almost on the same level as genius gamer Emu, you know. So yeah, it was a really interesting take on the mass production writers. Now, or pseudo writers, I mean. Now we actually go into Kamen Rider Drive. Actually, I forgot to mention Kamen Rider Drive. I'm sorry. I'm gonna jump back. I'm gonna jump back. So we had, obviously, Chase. So when Chase was introduced, so he transformed into Machine Chaser. Now, while he was still with, the other Roy Mutes, working with Heart, Medic, and Brain, so, the three of them simply transformed into their more Kaijin-like forms as Roy Mutes, but Chase was the only one who had his own transformation device, and his suit was definitely reminiscent of a rider, which kind of foreshadowed his eventual turn into an actual Kamen Rider Chaser, and of course, like the suit would retain some of the design elements, especially with the helmet, with the asymmetrical helmet and the orange eyes that they kept. So again, so this is one of the cases where like a character starts off as a uh, pseudo rider, but eventually becomes a Kamen Rider. Although technically, Chase was actually Kamen Rider Proto Drive before the start of the series. So yeah, if you want to consider that, sure. Now, the next case that I remember would be in Kamen Rider Build. So we have the Hell Bros, basically. So the gear that they use. I guess they took the Kaiser from the Exade and Build Team Up movie, so they reused it, kind of repainted it a bit. So especially when you use like both gears with a trans steam gun. So the Hell Bros, like both sides, again, they form kind of like a rider face actually. But again, it's not considered a Kamen Rider suit. So speaking of Kamen Rider build, I forgot to mention like before the Hell Bros came out and with the trans steam gun or nebula steam gun, I guess. So the trans steam gun users are actually Mad Rogue and Bloodstock. So especially with Mad Rogue, so uh, like the bat motif was really cool actually, in my opinion. Now again, this is another case of like a pseudo rider becoming a rider later on. So Nariaki Utsumi, so he was one of the users of the Mad Rogue, I guess, with Gentoku Himuro. So, well, Gentoku Himuro was mainly Mad Rogue, so he eventually turned into Kamen Rider Rogue. So he had like a different motif with the crocodile. But Nariaki became Kamen Rider Mad Rogue later on in the show, so he was the one who stuck to the bat motif. So again, like you would see like design elements that are carried over from Mad Rogue. So he's like the true successor to the Mad Rogue name. So again, it was an interesting twist. But Bloodstock, well, again, I would consider Bloodstock as a pseudo rider in that regard, but he definitely has like a less rider design. I'm not complaining, but it was cool, but definitely it has less rider attributes. But again, the idea was still there. Now, uh, I would say like the next step in like the rider, pseudo rider thing, I would say Kamen Rider Saber. So like there were members of like Sword of Logos that had like rider like forms. They were like elder members, I guess, like council members, like they had basically the same suit, but like some parts were differently colored to distinguish them from what from each other. Like they also had like different types of swords that they use, but yeah, they do lack any transformation device. I would say that kind of look like riders, but nonetheless, like the designs of the helmets, I guess, does they do remind me of like Kamen Rider designs basically. And I would say another one of those pseudo riders, I guess, like in Kamen Rider Geats, especially like the TTFC specials, like Kamen Rider Gazer was able to control like people and I guess like puppets, but I forgot the name of this suit. But again, this is one of like the mass production suits that were made for Kamen Rider Geats. Uh, Again, like I forgot the name, but if you guys remember or you can look it up for me, let me know in the comment section. I highly appreciate it. But yeah, it does remind me of that. So again, like they were definitely more into that TTFC exclusive kind of area. But it does also remind me of like premium Beroba and premium Gekara. Although, again, like they still use like the laser rays riser, but more as a weapon. And they look more Jamato than Kamen Rider. Like, of course, like they had their Kamen Rider forms, which again they turn into like giant frog and a giant minotaur basically. So like their suits were completely CGI as Kamen Riders. But again, questionable at best. So again, let me know in the comments. Like, would you consider premium Kekara, premium Beroba as pseudo riders? Let me know. I might. personally, but I don't know. Like they're definitely into a more gray area, if you ask me. What else? So we have Geats, right? I would say we would have like uh Gotchard may have had like pseudo writers in the form of the mass production dreads, I guess. The dread soldiers. Kamen Rider Dread has been, at some point Grion had mass produced the Kamen Rider Dread, and well, they're like unmanned suits, so like they can just move on their own. Like they don't have to transform, or they don't need people to transform into them, but they're just mass produced. So that one is a mass produced rider, if you would ask me. But again, uh like designs were there, but you know they weren't necessarily like Kamen Riders as well. So yeah, I could consider the mass production dreads as pseudo Kamen Riders. And in Kamen Rider Gav, I really couldn't remember anyone. Well, at least you know, moving forward though, we would have ta-da. So we had these in Kamen Rider Zets. So we have the Knights and the Lords. So obviously, so we're introduced first to Nox Knight. So again, he does have like the belt on his chest. He transforms, but again, his transformation phrase is Gisho instead of Henshin. Of course, Nox would become Kamen Rider Nox down the line, and the suit would be kind of like retooled to fit Minami as well. Uh, like Night 17 would be her name. Again, like it's basically like the same design suit, so just refitted for like a female character and then like a female form. So now we talk about the lords. So again, we have Lord 6 here. So just like the Nox Knight or Knight 17 suit, so they basically have the same designs. With the lords though, so they have the Lord Invoker, and yeah, so they would have like I guess different designs. Like Lord 3, for example, would have this cape, but obviously this is Lord 6. So this is again my personal customized version. But again, like despite having, like belts, their invokers and their weapons are again like more similar to Zets, the Breakum Zetzer, but again, they're considered as pseudo riders. So yeah, so that is my video on the pseudo Kamen Riders. Those who appear to be like Kamen Riders but technically are not. So let me know in the comments, did I miss anyone? Again, like information that I've missed, or information that I didn't get correctly. So let me know down in the comment section. So thanks for watching, and as always, please do leave a like, comment, share, subscribe, and don't forget that notification bell so you get the latest from JEFusion. This has been Philip, and I'll see you in the next video. Ogai Giso! Bye!